Welcome to the Trending Tokens podcast, featuring Jake Vale and Jeff Pulver. Today's guest is Dele Atanda, founder and CEO of metaKnights, the world's first self-sovereign AI and universal smart data marketplace, and founder of metaKnights, the world's first cryptographically based comic. Before I read the disclaimer, I need to add a personal disclaimer. I've been working with Dele on his registration crowdfund on the Start Engine platform, managing the marketing budgets and providing general consulting, and I'm a shareholder. All of the opinions on the Trending Tokens podcast are the opinions of Jake, Jeff, and the guests. Nothing should be taken as legal or trading advice, and nothing is investment advice. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. We hope you enjoy. Dele, welcome to the show.
It's great to see you.
It's been a while.
Where is everyone today?
I'm in New York.
I know, right? Oh, excellent. You made it back in time for the COVID lockdown, right?
I've been here for 120 plus days. It's been a lovely experience. So how have you been, and how has the company grown, and where are things at these days?
Oh, it's really well. So we've been working closely with Jake on metaKnights and getting that initiative going on Start Engine. You know, we had a little bit of a slow start because we hadn't really made it really clear to people exactly what the proposition was and how to get involved. But that's really sort of taken off like a rocket ship quite recently. And, you know, since the lockdown as well, we've been working hard on using our protocol to develop a COVID app as well. So it's been a very, very busy time, but we've made a huge amount of progress.
How many comic books have you created so far?
So, you know, we've basically been focusing on building the whole stack up, the whole sort of tech, the wallet, the whole concept. So we created a pilot series, which consisted of 2 episodes to get the story introduced, and then really started working on the wallet. And actually, you know, the great thing about this is I'll show you as we get into the conversation. I can actually show you these things as working pieces. So in that sense, we've been really knuckling down on building out the wallet, the protocol around it, getting the publishing capability behind it. But we've had over 5,000 views, and that's an old number, to be honest with you. I haven't checked the latest viewership numbers. We've had over 5,000 views of the pilot series that we've had running thus far.
Do you have plans to expand the storyline beyond those two?
Oh yeah. So yeah, we've actually, it's really interesting what's happening in the world right now. We're working on the next episode, the next 10 episodes now. So the kind of first season, and I can give you just a couple of pointers where what's happening. It's totally insane how this is all converging. The premise of the story is that there's this digital world and the physical world, and the digital world is overrun by these cyber vampires that are fangs, which suck people's data in the digital world to enslave them in the physical world. And there's a race between these fangs who run this huge system that controls the world, and the bats, who are the Eastern competitors who are trying to sort of rule the world. And there's a race to create a supercomputer, a super AI, and they believe whoever creates that first will basically be able to take control of both Digiterra, the digital world, and the physical world, to enslave mankind forever. So
very promising. It's almost, you know, prettier outlook than what we're living in right now.
Right. I know, this is really crazy, right? And like one of our heroes is Satoshi, and one of the things what we explore in the pilot series is the history of Satoshi, and we go back to Satoshi as a child and the role that he played in helping a lot of companies address the Millennium Bug. So what we found really interesting there is this notion. So what we're working into and I don't want to give too much away, but what we're working into this first season now is this concept that there was a bug, and that there was this virus that started in cyberspace the threat started in cyberspace, and that threat spilled into the real world, into the physical world 20 years later, effectively.
It's a little scary how those things could happen. And by the way, those large monolithic companies you're describing might be the modern day version of some rather popular, very large monolithic companies we know of today. So there are a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, speaking of Dele, how did the concept for the comic book itself, how did you come up with the initial concept? What was the sort of driving force behind that?
Yeah, and that inspiration. And why a comic book?
It's a great question. So I've always been a fan of comics. My brother was, a huge comic advocate. His apartment was like a library for comics. He worked with Marvel for years, so I grew up on comics. Yeah, Marvel and DC, but he actually worked with Marvel, and like he had everything. Like, so this was like in my late teens, early 20s. I grew up on comics. I read The Watchmen immediately it came out, and these were really formative on me. They really had a big impact on me growing up. And as I started to understand it more, actually, when I was looking at it, and actually, when I was at school, when I was very young, when I was at school in Nigeria, there was a lot of religious comics that were distributed through the school, and they really had a dramatic impact on me. And as I researched it more, I saw that comics were actually one of the most powerful means of political propaganda in terms of community. It's generally recognized around the world as one of the most popular formats of that. And so that was interesting. But then also I started to look at big social issues were often addressed in comics. So for example, very few people know that X-Men was based on was a parallel of looking at racism and looking at the civil rights movement, where Professor X
parts of the Holocaust actually in the X-Men as well, if you look at the origins.
Absolutely, and Captain America was very much developed as a fight, as a response to fascism that was happening during the Second World War, to corral interest around people, to give people a sense of what this war was about in many regards. And similarly, Professor X was modeled on Martin Luther King, interesting flip, and Magneto was modeled on Malcolm X, and it was all about exploring that narrative around, is non-violence or violence the right way to address otherness, difference in that regards? So, and in many ways, the X-Men stories, the films took that up, and Magneto became a victim of the Holocaust, grew up in concentration camps. So there is very much a history of comics being used to address these big social issues. And we feel that data sovereignty is the next big social issue of the day in that regard. So
well, it's certainly the big lie. I don't know if it's a social issue as much as it's a lie when everyone says we're not going to use your data. No, they will, and they are, and they have.
Yeah.
So it's really almost living with us today, and I don't see how that's going to go away anytime soon. I think that we've lost our privacy, we've lost the metadata. People believe for whatever reason that they could own it, and therefore they understand their customers better than their customers understand themselves at times. And there's a whole issue about, do you own your own metadata? If someone observes your behavior, why don't they own your behavior and not you? And where do you delineate between, I have a whole very strong belief that we should own everything about us, that all our digital breadcrumbs are owned by us, unless we license them to somebody else. Just because I walked into a movie and my eyes looked at this and looked at that, or if I walked into a Walmart and I looked at 17 signs but not 23 others, that's data that I know. But there are people in there looking at the eyes, looking to see where I'm focused on, and they're rating their products' effectiveness based on where my eyeballs literally are going, and they're mapping the behavior of who we are and what we do, and that data really comes down to observed data and actionable data. And then if we want to own the information about us, we need to figure out a solution, because it's one thing to identify that this is happening, but then what do we do about it? And how do we create the freedom to disconnect and reconnect our data to us, rather than someone else who's going to manipulate or own us or benefit from us? And so at some level, we need to have that revolution where we take ownership, because we didn't even realize we gave away our rights because we just clicked yes,
Yeah.
when really we were just trying to have information shared to us. And so, using the metaphor, or maybe it's a simile, but using the comic book as a means to share a story, it's fun because you don't have to be political. At the same time, you can very much address certain topical challenges, and have a story told, and connect those dots. So I understand the novel. I happen to be a big fan of the graphic novel. I grew up in comic book land. The first time I ever was noticed by the media was sixth grade, when I was the youngest comic book dealer at a comic book convention in New York City. And I grew up a very big fan of the comic book artist Jack Kirby, who did
Right.
both
Yes.
DC and Marvel. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a great admiration and wonderful memories about losing myself in the fantasy of those novels, and
Yeah.
reliving life through the comic book. And I use it also as a way to explain things. And the art, I don't think the art of the comic book is even appreciated so much, that it's so special, and now it's understood that we can do things with it. So I was a fan of what you were doing from the comic book side of things, not so much even
Right.
from the tech side, just because
Right.
it's a great way to share a subtle story. Sort of the same. What you were just talking about before reminded me of the early episodes of Star Trek,
Right.
where
Exactly.
where basically there was an episode on TV, and the storyline was actually making a political statement, but nothing in that story was that political. But if you
Yeah.
use it in the framework of what was going on in the nation, in America at that moment in time, it was quite political. And so I understand the meta message and the message, and it's a lot of fun. So I understand. I can appreciate your passion for comic books. And so with this project that you're working on, are you looking to become a distribution platform for other graphic novels? Are you looking to onboard other artists to join you in using this as a new publishing platform to compete with Marvel, to compete
Hmm.
with the establishment? What is what are some of your goals with what you're creating?
Yeah. Wow. And so much ground you covered there, Jeff, as always. So, but let me try and align it all with that. So, using comics to tell stories was for us a very compelling thing. But even more important than that, it was a way to put new technology, these new decentralized technologies, into people's hands. So the first idea of making the comics themselves non-fungible assets was critical. But I'll come back to that, because I think, to put it in context, I think there are three global pandemics we're facing right now. There's a COVID pandemic, there's a racism pandemic, and there is a data surveillance pandemic. And all three are catastrophic, in their
Yes, but
potential.
one has been systemic for a very long time, and the
Yes.
others have been more topical. Not
Yes.
necessarily, but I mean, I guess you could say pandemics are systemic, because if they wouldn't be a pandemic
Yeah. Yeah.
if we knew how to solve for it. But you're dealing with cultural challenges that's rooted in things that not necessarily any of the three of us we're responsible for. Yet we need to help
We
fix
all
and
inherited.
change this world and create a place where the values are there. I get that. And so it's these are challenging times. Look, and there's the and I don't even know if we're gonna we're only in phase one of this pandemic. The second wave really hasn't hit.
Yeah.
And so,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? The thing that really dawned on me, Jeff, about this recently, when I managed to kind of get it in my head about all of these three, is actually the cure to all three is the same thing. It's
love,
about a change in our behavior,
love.
right? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that kind of roots it, right? And of course, 100%, it is absolutely about love, but not all people can resonate with that. But that's the ultimate message. But fundamentally, what we're talking about when we're looking at the pandemic, it's not a vaccine that's going to save us. We still haven't found a vaccine to AIDS. It's behavior that's going to change us. When we look at racism, it's nothing but behavior that's going to change us. When we look at our data and You know, look at this Stop Profit for Hate movement. For the first time, Facebook is finally saying today, Bloomberg is reporting that Facebook is finally saying that they may remove political ads for the 2020
I just
election
want to
season.
just get rid of Facebook. I think that
I
Facebook
agree.
created a lot of love. It created lots of bonded, reunited relationships. But in 2019, there was never more hate propagated in the world
Yes.
than ever before. And I blame
Yeah.
Facebook for that, for providing a
100%.
convenient way for people to discover each other on the negative, not the positive side
Yeah.
of community, and
And
actually,
amplify it.
I heard an
Amplify.
interesting stat
I
today,
mean,
Jeff.
yes,
Out of those the Russian ads that were run on Facebook,
yeah.
55% of them dealt with race, not a political
Right.
candidate, not a political
Exactly.
issue, race.
But I
Like,
mean,
that was
but
it.
the manipulation, but the absolute manipulation by Cambridge Analytica, and how we were all tricked in 2016, and how they
Yeah.
played us
Yes.
by tweaking the AI and by tweaking certain preferences. That was all done with purpose and intention by the Facebook folks, and that's inexcusable. And the
Absolutely.
way that they continuously manipulated data, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, but not so sorry." Facebook's over as far as I'm concerned. It is a place which I use because there are people there that I know,
Yeah.
but I do not believe that Facebook's going to make it into the next 10 years from now, because they are self-destructive. And when
They're
people,
toxic. They're
when
socially toxic.
they are socially toxic, and they're bad for the world, not good for the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
You know, if you were telling me that Facebook is really about peace, love, and understanding, and they're just misunderstood, okay, I give them the benefit of the doubt. But if you look at how they tactfully or not so tactfully have mastered the art of using our data and profiting from it,
Yeah.
you know, and by the way, you know, if there were reparations that Facebook said, you know what, we took in $1 billion of revenue, we
Yeah.
appreciate you as a user, so everyone who's coming on board wouldn't give you $100 a month to stay here being a user.
Yeah.
It's not acceptable, but you know, it's gonna. There should be a class action lawsuit against them in every country, in every city, in every state,
I
for
agree.
where we've been taken advantage of. So I'm not so pro Facebook.
No, I'm completely with you. I mean, we're all preaching to the choir here, right?
But to your point, right? So systemically, you know, racism is something which, God willing, we can figure out in terms of how to address in a meaningful way that will once and forever maybe put us closer together than ever before, and we stay closer together than ever before, because it's also politicized. I'm telling you, what I like about love is the same thing I love about music, that these are things that go through, that transcend time, that bring
Yes.
everyone together, no matter
Yes.
who we are, where we
Yes.
are. We could relate, we can vibrate at a high frequency, and we can connect as one. When you politicize those things, you create unexpected consequences and misunderstood results. And so I don't like the politics of stuff, because people manipulate the information, and they don't care. They may use racism as the cause, but ultimately they don't care. They're just using it as a shield around what they're trying to achieve. And so,
Absolutely, like the current
but
administration.
like our current administration, and you know, it's a challenge, you know, and I'm sure there are good people everywhere, but I right now don't see always those good people, and it's challenging, and it's challenging at the same time. Owning our data, you know, maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when the commercial internet happened, it wasn't so obvious that there should be advocates to own our data, because what does that even mean? But the more we understand what the connected world will bring us, the more we realize, what did we give up? It's sort of, but it's like, we didn't even know we had those rights. We didn't even know that that we had that value. But now we are aware. We became self-aware, and we want to correct that wrong. But there's talk, but not enough action. And then
you're right. Can I just interject a bit on that, because there's a really important point that I think is related to that and what you said earlier, like behavior. Who owns our behavior? If someone monitors our behavior, who owns it? And the problem with all of this has been, historically, is that it's digital, and you know, it's the same problem with digital media, right? The problem with digital media was with Napster, that it was very easy to replicate, and there was no way that you could publish content digitally without in a way that you could control the IP around it. And so, and you see that this is why we have the streaming revolution now, whereby you lease music, and even with Apple Music, which Apple revolutionized things with iTunes. They were the commercial replacement of Napster because you could go and buy a song. But even in the Apple model, what they were really doing was just giving you a way to rent ownership for that song, because it was only associated to your identity. So you couldn't actually pass that on. And there's the famous case of Bruce Willis trying to sue Apple about this. Now, where blockchain really changed that game is that it gives us a way to actually own these intangible digital assets. And that's why the comic series is really important, because when we talk about the comics, people can understand comics, collectibles, digital collectibles as non-fungible assets. But that's the first step to understanding our data in the same way. So with MetaMe, that's what we've really focused on in terms of building this protocol where you can own intangible data assets as property. And when you can take your data and make it into a crypto asset that can be tracked, audited, and transacted around, then suddenly there is no reason for us not to own our data. There is no reason for us not to be able to monetize or extract value from that or put restrictions around it as property like any other form of property.
Yeah, of course, the enforcement's going to be really key, and even understanding what you just said by other people is going to be challenging. But I believe there is value that that hasn't been released yet to the general public, because you're operating, in the future, in the present time. So you're creating, if you will, an infrastructure for tomorrow, today. And, you just need to get one of those elements to be correct. And I think everything else can fall into place. But there's a lot of other things that are happening. So it's not so much whether it's blockchain or not. And there may be people listening to this podcast that don't understand what fungible and non-fungible are. But in terms of what you're working on, I was in a positive way taken back by a graphic novel as a project. I think that's kind of cool. And if you wanted to if you were not doing your novel, but you're talking to Marvel or DC or someone in another country with as big a set of assets in terms of comic books, and then looking at the digital rights just for the marketing of the characters and understanding merchandising, understanding that what is an authentically licensed product. If you have the right to Captain America, you have the right to Iron Man. Being able to know that the product is manufactured under license, so that this is not a clone, but this is an original product that's licensed, and you could track it from the origin of being created all the way through to the manufacturing process, and that what you're looking at and what you're purchasing is not a copy, but is a unique piece of a paraphernalia associated with a movie. That's important. And if what you're talking about really is that you're creating characters in a storyline, and you're sharing this story, and you're creating an example that in the future, people who are looking to authenticate original merchandise coming from a product line, coming from the serialization of the comic books into a movie or into an animated cartoon series or something, and people want to buy they want the merch, they want the merchandise, and they know that this is the licensed stuff because you're the one with the keys and you could track it. That provides a pathway for a future that people can understand. The whole idea of people observing other people's behavior and whose data it is, there's a strong case to be made that the observer owns the data because they're the ones observing. However, it's about you, so you should at least understand the implications of what it means to be you as a consumer. And frankly, if you didn't give them permission to observe you, there are a lot of challenges which we never even thought about protecting the rights of. And so that's probably at a right angle or obtuse to this entire conversation here. But I do think that there are lots of subtleties to what you're working on that makes your work even more valuable. And it's what you learn from it. I mean, I think part of this project's value is the learning that others will get, including you and your team, as you go on the journey of both explaining this to other people and then running the business and seeing where the results get you, because there's a lot that we don't know.
It's like a forced education, Jeff. When you were selling comic books as a younger man, you got a financial education through comic books is not taught in school.
I literally did, yes.
Exactly. Right. So
Yeah.
I learned about
you
capital
learned how to
markets.
handle money, and you learned how to all those
Yeah.
kind of things.
Hey, I thought I thought Spider-Man #8 was worth a lot of money, but it
Right.
turns out that what you have is only worth as much as the highest bid of somebody
It is
else.
someone's going to pay, right? Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. No, you're completely right, and I think it is a wonderful journey and it's exciting to be at this point now where we're moving from intangibles to tangibles, and we're able to start to bring these things to life. And there is a huge education and process, and that's again why storytelling is so important to actually help people relate to these things in a non-emotional way. And you know, one of the things I love talking with you, Jeff, is always this temporal perspective you bring, the ability to look at things from different time frames. And I think when we're looking at data, particularly, you know, people always say data is the oil of the 21st century. I think that's not, you know, and even, you know, I wrote something recently. I said data is more like the air of the 21st century, particularly in these COVID times. But even that is not accurate, because data is really the most complex, multifaceted resource that we have ever encountered. And it has so many nuances and behaviors, and it's a future resource in a sense that we're trying to understand with old models. So I think you're 100% right there that, you know, and we're all discovering, we're learning so much through execution, some of the nuances and some of the considerations that we're having to consider as we execute through this.
So so just beyond this for a moment, I'm just curious. So besides the projects you're working on, and living in a COVID world right now, 6 months from now or a year from now, whenever there is a vaccine, how has COVID-19 changed your thinking? Are you at an age that you believe you're at risk for travel? I mean, I happen to have been someone who for more than 20 years, probably 25 plus years, I probably did not spend more than 18 days in any one location, whether it was personal travel or business travel. And here I am right now, having not spent a night away for more than 100 and almost 130 days. And I'm a believer currently anyway that most business travel is over. That if you are an individual with loved ones, you will travel for personal reasons with intention and purpose, because just to go there with someone to have a shared experience. But the days that I would fly from New York to LA for an important business meeting, but 6 hours in a plane to go just for a meeting and come back, or to fly to London for a meeting and come back, I think those days are over for now, particularly now that we have technologies that have proven themselves that we can rely on and take for granted, that give us voice and video on the net as if it's always been here. And so I'm just curious, do you think business travel will come back to what it used to be? Or, are things going to be different in this, because you do comic books, so you can create this alternative reality. I'm just curious how you see it evolving, and what the longer term impact is going to be.
Sure. So, I mean, I think I love space shrinking technologies, which is communication technologies as well as travel technologies. Ultimately, we're trying to get to the stars here, right? So we definitely need to keep moving. And so, I love both of those. I do think that business travel has definitely fundamentally changed. In 5 years' time, will we be back to people traveling? A lot, probably, but invariably, I think we've entered a new reality. There is no such thing as going back to the old normal, and people are slowly getting used to that. And the question is, what is that new reality? Well, the new reality is that the reasons to get on a plane, I mean, to get on a plane and go for a meeting, there have to be compelling reasons now as to why you would get on a plane. And I think that will come down, the cost implications, the cost benefit of not having to get on planes all the time for meetings will start to play out. So it will be a cost benefit, a health benefit, a lifestyle benefit balance that will weigh up before we get on a plane and go forward anymore. I am cautious about this stuff as well, though, because again, there's a move towards being more global in our thinking, more international in our mindset. That's what opens people up. The more we travel, the more informed we become, the more progressive we become as a species. So I definitely don't think it is a good thing for the human race for us to become isolated and locked into our own spaces.
I would argue that you may see more people being nomadic, that you will find individuals traveling from, from North America to Bali to find their place. And I think individually, I'm just separating, intention and purpose of individual travel compared to business travel. I believe that we're going to see a huge run up of people working remotely in places that they relate to, where they find their inner peace and their calm, and they'll be all over the world.
Yes.
And if you want to be in Kathmandu, so be it. You can get internet access there. And you could write and you can create new novels there. You can do business. Where 25 years ago, it might have been a little bit forward thinking to say that anyone in the world who can connect to the internet can contribute in the internet economy. I think that's true. But I think today that, because at least the current iteration of what we're living with seems to have issues with close contact indoors, which would mean you want to avoid that. But outdoors, not such a problem. And for people who want to travel to see the world, I think as people, they will. But you may not have business sitting in a national park where you can relax. But if you have connectivity, you can do work. I think the definitions of things will change. Do you have to be in a boardroom to have a board meeting? Do you have to be in a conference room to be at a conference? Well, do you need to be in a classroom to hold a class? We know you don't have to be in a dark room to do photo processing. So the whole idea of rooms, the whole idea of how we grew up, that shifted probably forever. Or if not forever, we may be, nostalgic and we'll recreate certain things. And I would like to believe that large groups of people will assemble in different places around the world because they want to, but it may not be at CES. It may not be at Mobile World Congress, but it's going to be at places where there's that shared passion, where people just feel compelled to come together as one because they want to. And there's a higher vibration that brings them together. And I think some of that you can relate back to how this is going to affect change. And so, in the end, I hope that we as people get to own our data. I hope that we live in a world where everyone is, where we respect each other. We can break through the whole issue of racism, and for the first time ever, actually recognize the value of everybody. That we all recognize that life matters. That we get to a place where everyone is treated the same, and that we respect and love each other. And that's why I say love, because I don't know how to say, this is not to be mushy, but I think that if we can't respect and love each other, we're gonna have a hard time with racism for a long time, because you're gonna have bias there. And to some extent, I think that we can solve the data issue about owning the data if we learn to love ourselves and learn to understand that our metadata is important for us and our family and our future family's history, to understand who we were, that you can infer things about us if you simply connect our digital breadcrumbs together. And that becomes priceless for future memories, right? And to allow another company or another monolithic entity to own our destiny,
and not just your destiny, Jeff, your health data, your COVID-19 tracing data. Like, do you want Facebook in charge of your data?
Absolutely.
So that's why.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead, please.
No, I mean, you talking to you throws you back into the sci-fi world. It's like Philip Dick stuff. It's like everything we're talking about, and I'm thinking, wait a second, there was a book about this, there was a novel about this, and it's, and it's at some point I wonder when Skynet is operational, what's going to be happening here. And so, it's a little creepy to think that if we don't, but it's really wake up call, right? Really, to understand that the future hasn't happened, maybe, and that we have a chance to correct a wrong now by becoming self-aware that every person matters, that our data matters, and that we will control our destiny when it comes to how we are understood. and that it's up to everyone to get together to be as one. If we can do that, everything gets solved. And if we don't do that, it's going to be a pretty dark place out there. And I am someone who believes in light. I believe in that we win by finding light in others and by embracing good. And that, sometimes, it's a stolen quote, but sometimes you have to get broken to let the light in so that you can then actually be the light and
Yeah,
find that
yeah,
light.
yeah. No, absolutely, and I think I can definitely attest to a degree of that. No, I agree. Look, I think data sovereignty is, for me, like I say, I think it's it's the most important issue of our day, because I think it is, in this cyber physical reality, this quantum digital hybrid world that we're going into. Data is the structure of around all things. So, with the Internet Foundation, we've made it our mission that we want to make 1 billion people self-sovereign by 2030. And I think if you have 1 billion self-sovereign people, you then have the critical mass to be able to exact a different kind of change. So part of what we're doing with MetaKnights is putting this self-sovereign ID wallets into people's hands, because that's the spine, right? You start from owning your identity, then you bring your data sets around that, and you manage how your data is exposed through that. And I think the key thing is really, what I'm really fascinated about at the moment is the politicization of mask wearing, right? It's a really fascinating subject, right? And I urge everyone to go back and watch The Watchmen and look at it through the lens of COVID. How prophetic, right? That the whole thing about the premise was about cops wearing masks and cops being allowed to wear masks to protect themselves. And the whole debate now around masks being how we protect society, well, in many ways, it's the same thing with our data. If you think about anonymity and you think of the famous Guy Fawkes anonymous mask, right? That is how we protect our digital selves. And it's not just protecting ourselves, it's how we protect our societies. So I think there's a really interesting parallel emerging now around masks. And bear in mind, just before COVID, right, it was Hong Kong where they banned masks wearing, right, because of the riots and protests, right? They were literally banning people from wearing masks.
The masks got in the way of the facial ID that they were having, so that
exactly, and that's the thing, right? And that's one of the things I want to do: create some merch with Face ID crushing masks, right? With MetaKnights, and we got some things. We got some really interesting things we're working on with bringing MetaKnights and our Cove ID app together through a gamification framework where we can kind of pay people for doing contact tracing, but in an anonymized way, because that's the key. The only way you achieve privacy in a digital age is by having robust anonymity.
Yeah, we want anonymous and autonomous. We want to be able to travel, but you want to be anonymous and autonomous, and you want real-time contact tracing. You don't want to have to be having an operator sitting in front of SAP calling everybody who they think someone may have traced. But if you walk around a city and you had 37 contact points, and one of those contact points might have been exposed 3 minutes before you're there to an airburst where someone may have coughed, you should at least get a real-time notification. I don't care who it was. I just know that I now need to either self-quarantine or at least go in for a test that hopefully is accurate, so that I know what's going on. But we don't have any of that. That unfortunately is sci-fi fantasy today. When we
Jeff,
have
no, I have to correct you on that. We absolutely do. And next show, I will do a demo for you. I don't think we have time today, but that's exactly what we have built, and we're getting ready to launch it right now.
But that needs to be, for everyone, not just in one city, not just one country, but again, for the world as one. And even if you have it, to disperse it in a way that people will accept it, because
that's the big challenge.
There are a lot of people who do not want to have their identities known. They don't want to have their locations given up knowingly, and so it's a big mess. And part of the misunderstanding, I think, has been politicized.
Of course.
And that's going to happen. And unfortunately, unless you're in a country or a city or a state that it's administered by people who could at least understand what you were saying before, we're going to be far away from being able to actually live that reality, because we're not. I don't think you're running for political office.
No,
and
definitely not.
And I'm not either. I don't know, maybe Jake is, and so it's
Jake for president.
I've posted way too many ridiculous memes to ever run for president.
So I think it's going to take a lot of time for some of the core values to elevate quickly, even if they're the right thing to do, because people, I unfortunately have seen this, that many people rather keep doing what they used to do because it's predictable, than adopt something new that they just don't understand. And
you're right. You're 100% right. But I think the thing that I'm surprised about is there's a quickening. There's a quickening that's happening. If you ask, I kept saying that at the beginning of the year, or even I think it was by the end of last year. If you'd asked me like at the beginning of 2019. Would it be possible that by the end of 2019, you'd have Google, Facebook, Microsoft all competing on who was or trying to compete, at least in their messaging, on who had the best, and Apple, who had the best privacy, who was most private? I would have said not for another 5 years, but there we have it. This is the new paradigm. So there's a general accelerating, but then I think COVID is another quantum accelerator. It's a step change. So things are coming down the line a lot more quickly than we had previously anticipated.
I mean, the positive side of COVID is that it has become an excuse for the entire world to come together as one, to work together to a common cause. We haven't had that before in a very long time. We have it now, and for certain countries, it may be a missed opportunity. But hopefully, hopefully others will benefit from this unique moment in our history, that while we're on this planet, systemic change can occur, not only addressing one national issue, but really addressing climate change, addressing so many other things.
Absolutely.
Because it's nice to look out your window if you live in a certain country and see those mountains. It's nice to see those stars. It's nice to see a clearer ocean. And it's nice to have less pollution. But, that just only takes us so far. In the end,
you're 100% right, and just, sorry to interrupt you, but just wanted to. It's a really important point, because the thing about COVID is, like, we're wearing these masks around because there's an airborne disease, and we need to be able to protect what we breathe. But that's a lot simpler a problem to solve than the air itself being toxic, right? Which is what climate change is all.
But no one wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about any of that stuff. So it's like, okay, so I wear a mask to protect you from me. And I go to places where people wear masks because I want to protect them. I want to protect myself from my mom, who is of age, and I have to be careful. So it's these are challenging times. I did not see this forecasted last year. I never imagined what it would be like to be in one place, but in some ways it's a blessing to have a chance to spend time and appreciate what you love, and gives you a chance to be reflective and introspective, and gives you a chance to see things you couldn't always see when your life was so damn busy you never could breathe for yourself.
Absolutely.
So I wish everyone good health. I wish you major success in what your project is, and I do hope that as a world we come together and we actually solve some of these things. So when we look back in time and we look at videos like this, that maybe we say, yes, we got that one right.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I really appreciate that. And look, it just takes a few good men, a few people to kind of get a critical mass and a tipping point. That's I don't think we're going to reach all the people. I don't think that, and I do feel the world is splitting in some ways, those who want a brighter future and those who are trying to cling to a past. But, hopefully the brighter future wins out. And all we can do is keep soldiering on and keep pushing on and keep shining the light on the alternative future for people to come join us there.
May the force be with us.
Indeed.
Thanks for your time, Dele. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, guys. Really good fun. Cheers.
Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Well, metaKnights Media, a blockchain media company, announcing the release of its metaKnights. That's a cryptographic digital comic series.
So it's set in this world called Digiterra, which is like a digital world that mirrors the physical world. And in that world, there are cyber vampires who suck people's data. And that's not accidental.
Facebook, Apple, okay.
It's not accidental.
MetaKnights isn't just a graphic novel. It's a portal to the shifting future of your digital life, where extended reality and gaming meet the physical world.
One of the things we're doing with metaKnyts is we're releasing it with a wallet whereby, when people sign up, they will have a self-sovereign ID.
Anything you can imagine on a playing card can be created as a digital collectible and saved in your personal media wallet.
So the idea of creating a comics series where the issues are published as non-fungible tokens is really exciting, because it means that we can create collectible digital artifacts that can grow value over time.
Crypto actually allows us to own these assets independently of the platform.
It only takes a few minutes to purchase MetaKnights shares on startengine.com. You can own a stake in MetaKnights and the future of digital collectibles.